One.
Police say the man had just finished.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Eskin. On behalf of Eskin Fundraising Training, it's a pleasure to welcome you. Is 78 a lucky number? This is the 78th webinar in our nonprofit webinar series. Today is on a very important topic. It's on high performance development officers. I'm going to give them a thorough introduction, but let me welcome one of the masters in the fundraising profession, who has his own agency going back to 1999. We'll meet him for a little longer, but Jeff is in Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA. Jeff, how is the Jowdy family doing?
Doing fantastic, Jim, and thrilled to be here with you. Always appreciate you, and great to be with you and your learning community. Thank you.
Thank you. And by the way, Nashville is Music City, USA. What is your favorite? What is your favorite country song?
Oh, you never even call me by my name, by David Allan Coe, a classic.
Okay, Margie and I were thinking it might be All My Exes Live in Texas, and that's why I prefer to hang my hat in Tennessee. But by the way,
that's a pretty good one.
Series that we do every other Wednesday. The next one, a very active member of our learning community, Margie Hellshine, who's founder of America Connected, is going to talk about the synergy between mind, body, and soul. And Margie, we'll give you a whole minute. Can you talk about what we'll be getting into in the synergy between mind, body, and soul? I think she's muted, Michael.
Yeah, if you can go ahead and unmute Margie.
Margie, can you
How's that,
take a
everybody?
minute and tell us about what we'll be discussing next, not for 2 weeks from now, and mind, body, and
Make
soul
sure you
synergy?
join us. It's going to be something you've never done before. It's incorporating mind, body, spirit, and soul, along with computer yoga. And it's something everybody can do. No matter your age or physical condition, you will love it. You will learn from it, and it just really going to be great. You're going to have a new outlook when you work every day.
Margie, we look forward to having you lead that session. I'd like to introduce our producer, Michael Largent with Game Day Media. Michael, can you take a moment to tell our learning community audience how they either can join us sharing a question or comment in the chat space? Better yet, we rather see their pretty faces and come on camera. Can you take a moment to describe what they need to do? Michael, are you there? Michael,
Hello?
are you there?
Are you muted?
Yeah.
You muted?
It looks like
Hello,
he's
are you
having a
there?
mic issue.
Well, I'll tell you what, he'll
No.
catch up. Michael, are you there?
This is Mike.
Hello, can anyone hear me? Hello?
There are two ways. You can type your comment or question in the chat space, or you can raise your hand and Michael will give you audio and video privileges. We would prefer you choose the second option and come on camera and join us. Michael, are you there? Well, we'll catch you later.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Eskin Fundraising Training is pleased to sponsor these webinars. We're going to send out right at 5 o'clock a short written summary of points that Jeff and I have put together. And we also would say we want to make sure you're on the mailing list for a monthly newsletter called Stratagems, and you'll have an opportunity to sign up for that when we send it out. I was pleased to author my first book in 2019, 10 Simple Fundraising Lessons. Thank you, Jeff. It's all of 82 pages. Right now, I'm working on my next book, hopefully to be completed by the fall. It's called How to Score Your First or Next $1 Million Gift. You know, Jeff, I think a lot of time we in the industry, we talk about major gifts. We talk about leadership gifts. We talk about principal gifts. And it's only the practitioners like us who really know what you're talking about when I think you talk about $1 million gift, there's absolute clarity in what the goal is. So we believe that we can take anybody with an honest head, a honest heart, and a knowing head, and we can move them from fear to funded. We have a learning community made up of nonprofits of all different sectors, of all different sizes. We have board members, we have CEOs, we have directors of development, and we appreciate what each and every one of you do, because as it says here, nonprofits and the people who work and volunteer in nonprofits bring out the best of everyone. At this time, we'd like everybody to type in this is the only time we don't want you to come in camera. We'd rather have you type it in the chat space. Type in your name, the name of your nonprofit, and the location, okay? And Michael, are you there, by the way?
Yes, I'm here. I lost my headset sound for a second,
Okay,
but I'm
okay.
back.
Tell us, are you seeing any entries, and are there anybody from outside of San Antonio?
All right, I'll go ahead and read them as they appear. So we've got Kathy Gaston from Nashville, Tennessee. What's your
I wonder
nonprofit?
why. I think we have a Google Plus Mafia forming for this. Okay.
We've got Margie from Boca Raton, Florida. We've got Alexis Lara with the Through Project in San Antonio. We've got Cora Bale Cox, and she's the chair of strategic planning, San Antonio Assistance League. And Margie Helshaw is with
her
America
name?
Connected. What was her name?
What's her name?
Looks like Cora
What
Bale
was
Cox.
the name of the representative with the assistant league?
Yeah, Cora Bale Cox is what I'm seeing.
Cora, would you like to come on camera for a second?
Hi, Jim. Can you see me?
Yes, Cora.
Yes.
Is there
Can you
any,
see
first
me?
of all, we love with the Assistance League. I believe there's one in Nashville, there's assistance leagues all around the country. Cora, and I've seen close up what the good work that the Assistant League does for the community. Is there any, I have 500,000 questions ready for Mr. Jowdy, but is there anything that you would like us to answer? Do you have any questions? And we'll make sure we'll make it part of the mix. Do you have any questions you'd like to have answered over the next hour?
Well, not at the moment. This is my first position with Assistance League, so I'm kind of like a sponge.
Okay, well, hopefully you'll like what our liquid here. It's an honor now. I'm kind of jealous of everything. I don't know what part of fundraising and philanthropy that Jeff Jowdy has not done. He formed his own firm back in 1999. What are we on, the 23rd anniversary, Jeff? And it's called Lighthouse Counsel. Jeff, and he has a wonderful podcast program called The Beacon. And let me get to a little, Jeff and I have been talking about objectives for this show. And we want to talk about what makes a development officer great. How do you develop talent? And just as importantly, as everybody in the nonprofit sector knows, how do you keep contact? Now, I got a real tough question for Jeff. Jeff, there are a lot of fundraising firms out there. What makes Lighthouse Counsel different?
Well, that's a great question. And if you ask them to come on screen, I will lose them, but it's my team by far. And we got great strategists. And on the call today, and I see them, two of our most tenured professionals, Luann Delaney and Kathy Gaston, who've been with me 15 plus years, former clients. They have a lot of fun, they're savvy, and they know strategy. So the big difference is our team. I'm very fortunate to have an incredible team, and including folks like my longtime friends and colleagues, Kathy and Luann.
And I want to say one other thing. The Lighthouse Council is hosting a briefing on the findings of Giving USA for 2021. Can you tell us a little bit about the briefing that you are hosting? Is it free of charge?
Yeah, we are and thank you, Jim. We're really excited. Giving USA will be released next week. And of course, it's the report on giving in the USA. This will be the report, of course, on 2021, but it's Giving USA 2022. This is our second briefing. July 19th. It's free of charge, virtual, 9 to 10 Central. And the first part of the program will be highlights of the findings on Giving USA 2022 from two of the key researchers from Indiana University, Dr. Una Osili and Dr. Anna Pruitt. And they were with us last year. They're rock stars. And then we have an incredible panel to say what are you seeing on the ground. We got Dr. Benny Harris, Chancellor of the University of South Carolina Upstate, Rachel Hutchison, Vice President of Blackbaud, Joanne Polis, who is President of the HCA Healthcare Foundation and leads their community engagement nationwide, Eric Higgs, the CEO of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Middle Tennessee, and then Dr. Stuart Gulley, who is President of Woodward Academy in Atlanta, one of the nation's premier independent schools, for a panel discussion. So we're thrilled and
Jeff,
would love to have.
if that panel can't answer a question, I don't think there's a panel on the planet that can do so.
Yeah.
Jeff, and what he's going to do, we're going to post a short summary on LinkedIn, and then we're going to post the tape. And Jeff is going to give you the link so you can sign up for this briefing. I just signed up about an hour ago, so I think
Great. Thank you.
I'm in there. Be smart and sign up for this free briefing. I have some broad questions that I'd like to begin with, Jeff, before we dig into what makes a great development officer.
Mhm.
First of all, you've been working on this business. I think you're catching up to me in the gray department. I'm ahead of you. But why do you think board members and community leaders who are virtually fearless of everything they have to do in their careers, except one thing, ask for a friend or someone they know a gift for their favorite nonprofit? Why do you think board members and nonprofit leaders are so scared of asking for gifts?
Well, I think there's fear of rejection because nothing is more personal than money. It's amazing. They're incredible board members, working on nonprofits of all kinds, from higher ed, independent schools. But sometimes it would seem that some board members, take off their logic hat when they're dealing with a nonprofit. So things that they would expect not to have happen in a business, they'll just see it happen in a nonprofit and not question it. So I think it's not only that fear, which certainly can be overcome. And I think part of the reason they're afraid is that the nonprofits they're working with are approaching it incorrectly, and the fundraisers are. And the other is that, I hate to say it, but I call it like I see it, some board members don't take their nonprofit role seriously.
Well put. I'm going to ask you another very broad question. We've been coming through 2 years of like something we've never seen before. What do you think we discovered are the capabilities, and what have we discovered are the limitations of virtual fundraising?
Yeah. Well, I think we've all are coming out of this with new tools that can save time and help us be more efficient. And those things work. We find that with an existing relationship, especially, video and even video conferencing can be effective. But, I'm here in a client's office. I had to present to their board earlier today, and you're not in person with me. And so this is my office. You wouldn't see what was behind me necessarily. I might have a screen. You wouldn't see, things happening. We're used to seeing kids and family now, which is fun, but there are a lot of cues that you just don't get on video in terms of nonverbals, in terms of what's around them, in terms of the things on their wall that may signify what's important to them. So, the keeping the relationship going and starting it to some degree can be virtual, but there's still no replacement to being face-to-face with the donor and having that conversation and really being engaged. So it's a great tool. We've had clients very successfully use, video outreach, video messages, personal messages to a phenomenal degree, great success. But there's just still no people are yearning to be together again and being able to sit across the table, enjoy a cup of coffee and connect. So we've definitely had a lot of efficiencies discovered, but also there are certainly limitations in terms of how human beings are wired. And It's like the years ago we said there'd be no more bowling alleys, or movie theaters. People can be at home watching video, and theaters are booming today still. So we want to be
Jeff, do you
connected.
think-
We want to
Do
see
you
each
think
other.
fundraisers are born or made?
Oh, I think
you think
they are made because, and this may be a precursor to another question.
Yeah.
Because
And if they're made, what goes in the process of making them?
well, one of the failings in our profession, and I think failings in board and failings with CEOs is that people think that fundraising is like sales, and it's just not. It's fundraising is sales are transactional. It's a noble profession, but fundraising is transformational, and it's a whole different relationship. So one of the worst things would be so often, we're going to hire John or Susan because they're good salespeople. They talk well. Well, half of those folks don't listen, and if they do listen, they don't have the emotional intelligence to know what's really happening in the room, and we've all been there. So it takes a lot of coaching, but definitely, fundraising can be taught, and those skills and nuances can be taught.
That leads perfectly to my next question. How much can be taught in the classroom, and what has to be learned by field work?
Yeah. The classroom, I can recall early in my career, I worked with a wonderful organization, the March of Dimes, and led 5 offices for the March of Dimes. And they kept talking about wanting to get into major gifts. They never seemed to get there. And
Did we
What?
lose Jeff's audio?
There's an
Jeff, we
audio
lost your
problem.
audio.
Yeah, I think we lost Jeff's audio.
Hold us with a minute.
is that better?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's much better.
Okay, great. Sorry. So, I took it on myself to learn about capital campaigns and major gift fundraising through learning from the master Jerry Panis, Bill Sturtevant, attending seminars, going to case conferences, reading books. And I had a great knowledge of what happened. But then when I inherited a campaign that I call it the campaign from hell, and I know a lot of us have experienced those, and you had to fix it and repair it, and you learn the dynamics and the relationships. That's where you need to be hands-on, so you can definitely learn from the book, but it takes that experience of interact, because it's an art and a science, and you learn the science from the book, and you can get some nuances of the art, but until you've been there face to face with folks and encountered the problems and enjoyed the great experience of helping someone uncover what they can do through their giving, it's just those nuances, those relationships. And again, that's, frankly, about the difference in different firms. That's part of our advantage. People, you need to have done it to teach it and to coach it.
Jeff, can you take a fundraiser who's been successful on solicitations of $10,000 and make them effective in solicitations of $1 million? And talk about that process.
Yeah, absolutely. The big challenge, frankly, and if we had everybody on screen, I would say, okay, let's say together $1 million or $5 million. I think there are 2 challenges. One is that some of us are intimidated by the size of a gift. Okay. So it literally can be hard to say that figure, and you do have to practice sometimes. And the other is that some people can be intimidated by wealth or power, and you can't be in our profession and have that. People are people. And if someone has, years ago, I was working with a client, and we had a board member made I think it was a $200,000 gift, and I started doing math on net worth, and it was like me making a $200 gift, literally. So it's people are people, and those gifts, you're asking for gifts that are proportional. So that $10,000 gift, which is a wonderful gift for that donor, may be as meaningful in terms of their assets and as $1 million gift for somebody else. So it's all the same. It's relationship building. It's doing the right things and knowing what that right amount is to suggest, or they might volunteer. But it's not being afraid of wealth and not being intimidated by folks, and being able to save those larger amounts and getting the experience. Frankly, back to your point earlier, you just got to be out there and in the field, in the arena, and interacting with folks and doing it the right way.
Can't we promise our audience making your second, third, and fourth solicitation is going to be so much easier than your first solicitation?
And and Jim, and we are so caught up in the right way on their books on how to ask, their seminars on how to ask. And the reality is, if we really honor the donor and are wonderful at relationship building and sharing common values, then the ask is pretty darn easy in most cases. And we get so caught up in, you don't need to read a whole book or a webinar. If you treat people right and cultivate them and engage them and honor them, then it's going to take care of itself. And yes, there are some nuances and things that are important, but it's not as complicated nor as intimidating as too often some in our profession, promote, or some of us fear.
I will testify, it's easier than root canal.
Amen.
Hey, we like to think that the answers are always in our audience. We have CEOs, executive directors, we have some development officers. I'd like to reach into our audience. Does anybody want to come on camera and either share what they were looking for in a good developing officer, or what they are looking for right now, or a development officer talking, what was the environment you had that made you successful? Does anybody in the audience want to join us? This is your time. I have a lot more questions for Jeff. Humans are always logical too. So anybody in the audience like to come on camera? Not all at once. Well, I got a lot of questions for Jeff. And by the way, type in the chat space. If you have a suggestion for a future topic, type that in, or you can come on camera. We'd like to know. We have webinars booked right now and through October, but we're looking for suggestions. Anybody have a suggestion for a future topic? And then I'm going to get back to my dialogue with Jeff. David Schrackman, who's a peer of Jeff Jowdy, who I believe is in the nutmeg state of Connecticut. Is that right, David?
I am actually back down in New Orleans for this week.
I can't keep up with you. I can't keep up with you.
No, that's the whole point. The sheriff can't either, which is why I do that.
Hey, listen, David, when you hire development officers, what do you look for when you hire a development officer?
Well, and to the point that my friend Jeff was just making, the old cliche, God made us with 2 ears and 1 mouth, with the idea that hopefully we listen twice as much as we would talk. To Jeff's point, if we are listening to what our potential donors are saying, and then once they become donors, listen to what they are saying about why they do what they do, you end up as a much more successful development officer. And I will play semantics for a minute. And the reason we call them development officers and not fundraising officers is that because they're supposed to develop relationships. And that's really what, in my view, one needs to look for, is someone who is asking questions. They need to be the right questions.
Yeah.
But
I'll tell you what.
and then listening to what the response is.
Yeah. They're not just developing relationships. They should be developing friendships that are going to last.
That is the next step.
Yes, and when the donor says no, because you're tied together by mutual values, priorities, and interests.
Yes.
David, we're gonna ask you some more questions, so you keep close. So I'm gonna get back. It's time to beat up Jeff a little. Jeff, do you believe people with strong background as salespeople would be successful as development officer? Why or why not?
If you don't, real quick, and it's great to see my friend David, and I always learn from him, and we had a conversation not too long ago about cultivation, but someone, I think you mentioned, and David referred to it, titles. And one of the things that just frustrates the dickens out of me, and especially universities are famous for it, we got a principal gifts officer and a whatever officer and whatever. And how does the donor feel with that? Let's think about it from a donor's perspective and how confusing, and who cares? To David's point, we're about developing relationships. And so to have these crazy titles, now, Jim, to your question about sales, I think it's tough. I really do. In a lot of cases, depending on what their approach is. It's like, for example, the same comparison with communications. I mean, marketing communications is different than fundraising communications, and marketing communications, we're selling and we're thumping our chest, and donor fundraising communication should be donor centric. I found it very difficult for most marketing professionals to be able to communicate with the fundraising lens. And I feel the same way about many, if not most of the sales professionals. Great people, I got great friends in the profession. It's just different. And if you've been in there for 5, 10, 20 years, then you've got habits ingrained that are tough. And the same would apply to, it's really popular in higher ed. There's some folks who do training that's, really sales-based training for fundraisers. I think one of them's got a theme: raise more money faster. How would your donor feel if they knew the theme of your consulting firm or your training firm was raise more money faster? And, and some of those folks involved, their, for-profit company, never been in the arena of fundraising or higher ed or what have you. So I think it's really, it's very different, and it's a challenge. It's oftentimes, it's great now that there's so many programs, Jim, like your learning community, like the educational programs where folks earlier in their career or whatever stage can really learn about fundraising if they do want to make that transition, but it's very different.
Hey, Jeff, have we learned that it takes different skill sets to raise money virtually than to raise money in person?
Well, it's back to the, if you got an existing relationship, you can make the ask virtually. Again, folks want to be face to face. I don't know of any 7-figure gifts, that I could be wrong, that were probably made or that weren't already started during the pandemic. So it's a great resource, it's a great tool, but there's no substitute for being there face to face.
What I'm hearing too, a lot depends on the history of the relationship. If David had been supporting my nonprofit for 10 years, say at the $50,000 level, we could make a video ask of him, say, to increase to 500,000 based on the history and his passion for our mission.
Yeah, you've got a long relationship, but to start one, it's just not the same until you've seen somebody.
I agree. Hey, let's talk about the onboarding of nonprofit development officers. You get a new development officer, what's the best way to develop their passion for the mission?
I'm sorry, the passion for?
The mission.
Well, if you have to develop their passion for the mission, you've made a mishire.
And how about the stories? What's the best way to onboard a development officer?
I think I had a LinkedIn message from someone 2 weeks ago that I've never met. And she said, I've enjoyed following your blogs and the content you post, but I'm leaving the fundraising arena because how I've been treated during the pandemic and poor management. So I think number one is, if we're really serious about keeping people in fundraising, and we got the, 1.5, 2 year max annual tenure, then we have to look at things differently. Some of us do. And that is that if we are leaders at a nonprofit, whether it's a fundraising spot or whatever, our job is to mentor and coach people and make them successful and to build them up. And yes, there are times when there may have to be a transition, but I think too often that people are thrown into, like this lady that messaged me, to a job, a situation where the climate, where the culture just is not positive, it's not strong, and leaders aren't developing folks, and that makes a big difference. So I think part of it is the culture of the organization and the approach that leadership takes at whatever level in investing in people and making them successful. Part of the job of the leader is to develop people.
We have a mantra for our show, and it's nonprofit strong. So at this time, I'd like everyone to type in the chat space those 3 words, nonprofit strong. I'll ask Jeff, what are we, Jeff?
Nonprofit strong.
That's correct. David, what are we?
You did nonprofit strong.
Right. Cora, what are we?
We are nonprofit strong.
Everybody gets an A. Let's continue to talk about onboarding of development officers so they can be successful. Jeff, how do you think development officers can work with board members in the discovery, the cultivation, the solicitation, and the stewardship of donor prospects?
It's an important partnership because we need to leverage relationships. We're never going to have as many staff as we may think we need to have to reach the prospects that we have. So the board role is essential for many reasons. One is their fiduciary role in oversight of the organization, and second is their role, in ambassadors and in fundraising. So one of the important pieces, frankly, is we got to have enough staff, sufficient staff to support the board, because to our conversation earlier, and the point that you made, too many board members don't feel comfortable reaching out. They don't know what to do. They don't have the talking points. They don't have things that make it easy. And it's like being in a campaign and having a campaign committee. If you can't support a campaign committee, if you can't support a board of trustees with that coaching, that encouragement, that recognition along the way, they're not going to be successful. And too often we just say, okay, here's your 5 names, go bring them in or do a tour or what have you, without the resources and support that they need to be successful.
Jeff, you talked about the high rate of turnover in the fundraising profession. And it's something like, we're lucky if we can keep a development officer for 1 to 2 years. What are your thoughts besides money? And of course, money is a very important issue. What are ideas on strategies to keep your development officer?
Well, I mean, the number one thing is stop hiring people that are job hopping after a year, 6 months, a year and a half. Don't do it. I mean, we're promoting the issue by hiring people in a profession, and other professions are different. But in fundraising, we all acknowledge it's based on deep relationships. True? So why in the heck are we hiring people that are willing to jump ship after 6 months, a year, or 2 years? And it's insane. And I know of a major university, and I won't name it, that hired someone who, as their VP for advancement, that had been 2 years in their last job and 3 years at the previous. Then in their last job, they were already parked in the president's office. They didn't have the active role anymore. What does that tell you? So red flags, but they're hired. So we've got to hold the line, and there are incredible, search firms like Sally Bryant, who you had last week.
Yeah, right.
Great folks, but we've just got to stop doing this. We got to stop hiring folks and encouraging that, and it's got to start somewhere.
Hey, let's talk, Jeff. How can you tell during the interview process that the candidates really like to solicit?
Well, I think it's getting them to share about what they've done. One of our colleagues of Luann and Kathy is Karen Baldwin, Dr. Karen Baldwin, who was the former VP at the University of Alabama, and she, for a long successful tenure, said that too often that she encountered fundraisers who frankly just didn't like to ask. And we've all seen it. They're going to sit in the office, they're going to write grants, they're going to do everything that they can. So I would say if you're in that process, number one, interview more than once, because frankly, I make presentations on behalf of our firm, and there are days that I'm sick and don't feel good, frankly, So
Yeah.
to make a major decision based on 30 minutes or an hour one time, I think is foolish. So
Jeff, how can a nonprofit have confidence that David or Al or Jim can raise $1,000 gifts, or they can have confidence they can raise $100,000 gifts?
Well, I would say, number one, you look at the data, but people can hide behind the data, because if you're at a major institution, it takes years to turn a fundraising program, and it takes years for it to start falling apart sometimes. So, but you've got to look at the data, and then you got to drill down and ask the questions that we know what to ask. Were they really responsible? Who brought in those gifts? Well, and then it's a matter of asking the question, tell me about some visits and solicitations with donors. And then when you're doing your due diligence, it's talking to board members and even donors, if possible, they've worked with. Because if they've done a great job, donors, even though they may not want them to leave an institution, or board members are going to be willing to share.
Jeff, a lot of people on the outside think that fundraisers are smooth and they're persuasive and they're glib and silver tongues and all that, which is important. But can you talk about the power of listening?
I don't think necessarily that, that's the case. To your point earlier, I think, it's being genuine and having ethics and being a good listener is a lot more important than being smooth. And people sense that. A lot of donors can, not every, but we've all seen it. We've all seen someone, whether it's a staff person or a consultant or whomever it is, that's the smooth talker. And what's the Texas saying? Big hat, no cattle. Is that right?
Right. Hey,
So,
we've been joined by Al Hartman, who's on the board of the University Health System Foundation. Al, you have heard it both as you've been a dean at a law school for fundraising, and you sit on a board. To you, what tells you somebody has listening skills?
I guess if they will listen to me, that is an outstanding listening skill, because sometimes real curious if I have very much to say. But I think that you have to focus on that point. But of course, I think that it's very important that you know who you're listening to. And particularly when you were talking a little earlier about the big gifts. And so I believe that learning about someone's listening skill is again, I believe strongly in face-to-face meetings. Of course, I think that may be a generational thing. I think that the millennials, or I'm not even sure what face-to-face
Yes,
meetings
I'd like
may
you to
actually.
react to this. I went to a presentation from Penelope Burke, who's been a prolific researcher. And she looked at the characteristics of successful fundraisers, and she said that they have a broad range of interests. So they're very relatable. They meet David and he's really into beagles. They can talk about beagles. Or they meet Al and he's really into Persian cats. He can talk about Persian cats. Can we talk about how a development officer needs to have a wide set of interests and be able to enter the donor's world?
I think that makes a whole lot of sense. But again, I think we need to focus on knowing the donor, know what the donor raises Afghans, and know a little something about Afghans. I think that
Sure.
Knowing
And
your
Jeff, would
donor
you like
may
to
be the
take
major
a
skill.
a swing at that question?
Well, I would suggest that I think you need to be a lifelong learner, inquisitive.
Mhm.
I'm not sure about a broad set of interests. I'd rather ask Al, I understand that you are passionate about flying. I'm scared of airplanes. Tell me about how did that come about? What are you doing? So I'd rather frankly ask the donor about their interest than being able to engage in a conversation. Now, if I can, that's fine. But again, I want to learn and I want to learn from them in a sincere way. So if I don't have that knowledge, I'm not intimidated. I have to be interested. That's, I think, the most important thing is a genuine interest in other people and wanting to learn about them. And gosh, I'd love to learn about whatever that hobby may be. And it's genuine. It's interesting and fascinating. I know nothing about it. And people are receptive to that, to say, well, I'd love to come over and I'll show you. Come by, I'll take you on I'll take you on a flight.
Sign me up.
Yeah.
Hey, and another thing, I think a lot of our effective development officers, and I like David to chime in, they read a lot. You know, they read periodicals, the news, they read the latest fiction and nonfiction. It's a great way to relate to people. David, you want to comment?
No, I agree, but I also agree with Jeff's point that it is useful as a conversation starter, but you should be talking less about what you've read as opposed to asking the person on the other side of the table what they've read. Now, being well read means that you can then engage in a conversation even if you haven't read the same books. But I agree with Jeff that it comes down to listening to what your donor or potential donor is talking about and engaging them in a conversation. The more informed, and I'll differentiate that from the smarter you are, the better you're able to engage in a conversation and ultimately build a relationship and ultimately build a friendship.
Hey, Jeff, let's talk about, it's up to the development officer to work with their CEO, their board members, their board chair, to schedule meetings with very important people. And sometimes they have to do some very diplomatic reminding. What is key for staff to motivate either their CEO or their board members to do things as far as advancing relationships?
It's that gentle nudging, and it's having a relationship with them where they're going to respond in respect. I've told the story many times that years ago, I think I was serving on 5 or 6 boards. If I had the CEO of each of those organizations call me at the time, there was one I would have called back that day. The others, not so much. So you got to have the relationship with the board where they're not only passionate about your mission, but you have a relationship and they respect you and they feel an obligation and loyalty to call you and put you at the top of the list because chances are they are serving on other boards or engaged. For the CEO, that's a huge challenge, frankly, and a challenge that we face in our arena. And we see it when we get involved in a feasibility study or in a campaign. One of the key issues and challenges that we face and that we bring up front and center is that the CEO has got to be involved in the process, period, and they've got to be engaged every week. And we frankly get the board chairs now engaged early in the process. So if the CEOs, and they do sometimes for whatever reason, want to abdicate their role, then we're going to address it in a nice way, but we're also going to be able to encourage them through the board if we have to, because we all know if the CEO is not engaged and not out making visits and making asks, we're not going to be successful. And I've seen CEOs that are wonderful at it. I've seen CEOs that in their last position and in most of their career they were development officers, advancement professionals, and they don't make visits.
Hey, Jeff, can you talk about when the development officer teams up with the CEO or a board member, what type of preparation, and how can they also help with follow-up? How can the staff member do some of that really important preparation and follow-up work?
Well, we believe every visit for, for a major gift should be scripted, whether it's an outline, whether it's a cultivation or a solicitation. So you want to know, what are the objectives, what are the outcomes that you want to achieve, what are your long-term goals with that donor, and then you want to know who is involved, who's going to be on the visit, who you want to say what, and then you want to cover it, and you want to not only put it in writing, but have a video call ahead of time to review that, to make sure everybody feels comfortable and they know what their role is. And then you want to debrief, after every visit. And then, the one of the huge things is to have more than one person on a visit if possible, for a number of reasons, because back to the listening, not everybody picks up on the same cues, and someone may underreact, someone may overreact, someone may not pick up on the need to make a follow-up question to clarify what may seem to be an objection, but really isn't. So that's the preparation, it's the follow-up, and then whenever possible, if it is a significant gift for that organization or for the donor, that you have more than one person engaged in the arena so that you can have that conversation after. What did you see? What did you see? What did you hear? What are our next steps?
Jeff, can you talk a little about the gift rating process? Okay, a staff is working with a board member. How do they know how much to ask for?
Ask the board member?
No, no. A staff member is working with a board member's prospect.
Gotcha.
How do they know how much to ask for?
Well, you do. Hopefully, number one, we've done the research, so you may have a sense of wealth. You may have a sense for life cycle. So I could have a high net worth, but if I've got cancer or my family's got an issue, then that life cycle, those different issues affect even someone with liquidity and high net worth. So you've done the research, you've looked at the past giving experience, but the best thing is you've done some benchmarking along the way, and you already know the donor is passionate about the organization, and they've asked questions about the project, and you've hopefully had the chance to test, and what other gifts are that they've made, so you can benchmark. And if you make a appropriate request in the appropriate way, people are not going to be offended. And so you've done your homework, you've done the research, but the most important is you've had those conversations ahead of time where you've got a sense for what they're feeling and what they're thinking before you make the ask.
What are good ways for development officers to work on their professional development?
I think that programs like yours, and I think it's being discerning, frankly. You provide, Jim, a great service. You mentioned reading, you mentioned the conferences, the books. We've got a resource library in our office here with 400 or 500 book titles that we refer to, and it's a resource for clients. So, reading, but I think it's discernment, frankly, because one of the, a pro of technology and social media is, you can learn from all kinds of folks every day. But my caveat would be, if you're reading a professional's, if they're sponsoring a webinar or doing a talk and there's not much talk about their real world experience, I'd be a little bit wary. I'd go with the Jim Eskins, who have decades of real world experience, and I'd be looking for the conferences that provide good content. AFP, whether it be local chapter meetings or, of course, the international conference is a home run. Some of the regional conferences, that's always a great source. AHP, other professional associations. So there are a lot of opportunities, and it's important that not only we as professionals make that commitment, but that our organizations do to fund that development. But I'd say there are plenty of opportunities, take advantage of them, but be discerning about who you're learning from.
Jeff, what have you found in top-down type of relationship has worked, where you have the CEO, the executive director, and the board is really coming to the development officer for their advice and not just running off and doing it by whatever comes in their head?
the board is following advice, right?
Yeah, I mean, how do you have a culture of gratitude or philanthropy where the CEO and the board members aren't just running off and doing something by, their gut reaction, but they're
Yeah.
working in tandem with the development team?
Yeah, it's, well, you said it, it's a culture of philanthropy. It starts at the top, and it has to evolve eventually, that you accept proven best practices, so that we're not adding 30 different special events, and we're not, in the office writing for grants when we talk about giving USA, when we know that year after year, 90% of the gifts come from people, living and dead, but from people. And the growth in the family, in the foundation world, has come in a large part by some of the names we would all recognize in family foundations. And so still people making those decisions. Then we have to know that follow the expert advice. I mean, most organizations, the board or the organization would not hire an accountant and then question the plan that the accountant shares and say, oh no, we won't do that. We're not gonna worry about, GAAP accounting, whatever the principle is. Or you wouldn't retain an attorney to say, oh, well, they recommended we don't do that, or we'd be in severe litigation. We're going to do it anyway because we know better. But for whatever reason, fundraising is one of the functions that a lot of people think they're experts in, and they're not. So it's staying true to best practices and holding firm. And it's much like when I said, how do you have people, how do we increase tenure and fundraising in nonprofits? Well, we stop hiring people that are job hopping. You got to stop it. And the same thing, if as professionals, and we've all been there, I think, when an organization is really, the CEO or the board are not going to do the right things, and it's probably time to move on. If you've made those efforts, and we've seen it as counsel, we've come alongside organizations, done everything we can, and they're just not going to change, then you've done all you can do, and it's time to move on.
I have one question, then I want to make sure we work in some questions from the audience. My last question for you, do development officers make good executive directors?
Some do and some don't.
And which ones do and which ones don't?
Well, it's success in fundraising doesn't mean you're a good supervisor, a good leader, a good coach. And you got it right here that all of a sudden when you're CEO, your scope increases and changes. And sometimes, believe it or not, and I've mentioned this, I was talking to a friend, a mentor who was former chairman and CEO of a Fortune 100 company. And he said, Jeff, sometimes when you promote people, their previous role and strength becomes their weaknesses. And I hadn't thought about that. But I'm reminded this last week by two former university presidents that I knew that had been lifelong advancement professionals. And when they became presidents of institutions, they sat in their office and didn't make calls.
I think this is such a burning issue. We should come back to it. Let's talk a little more about retention, because the fact of the matter is fundraiser retention is awful. What are some clues in keeping folks?
It's, again, you've got to, from my perspective, you've got to treat, it's the golden rule. You're treating people like you want to be treated. You're investing in people. You're realizing that in some roles in fundraising, it may take a year or two or three to get the return. This is the fundraising versus the sales, the relationship. So you're in it for the long haul, and you're coaching and developing people. You're hiring for values, number one, right? And so ethics and so you've got to, create the culture. Like the lady that emailed, the LinkedIn messaged me that was leaving, it was a toxic environment. So the same thing is you got to coach people, and you got to have a work environment that people respect each other. They may have disagreements, but if you've got folks who are toxic, you get rid of them, frankly. So it's creating that culture of nurturing and support and helping them fulfill their potential and their career objectives, whatever they may be. And if you do that, what I found is that people don't always go for the money. You know, we're talking about a tough job market and salaries increasing, but I've myself done this. I've taken a lateral move to be in a better position long term, and to be at a better environment, better culture. And
Okay, we don't have much time left. Do we have any last questions from the audience? And then I want Jeff to comment on how you measure the performance of a development officer. But before David, Al, Cora, anybody else, Margie, any other questions from the audience? Well, while you're thinking, Jeff, what are ways to measure the effectiveness of a development officer?
Well, there are a lot of ways, but at the end of the day, bottom line, you've got to measure it by money. You just got to. So what are the goals for that that professional for that year or a 2 or 3 year period? But then there's others, and it depends on their role. The number of visits. How many asks are they making? So all those benchmarks that lead to it. How are they, other indicators of how they're deepening relationships? What are they doing? So but you got to have the bottom line. That's important, but it's got to be a realistic bottom line given their portfolio or their role, the resources they have. And, so what are they doing and what steps are they taking in addition to that bottom line? What steps are they taking to meet and increase that bottom line with an eye on deepening donor relationships and having the donor number one.
Jeff, as I suspect, the time has just flown by, and you really are a treasure chest of knowledge, both of theory and practical advice. And when you do a good job, we better warn you, we're going to invite you back. We have a couple of minutes. Any last questions? David?
You're going to be in DC next month for the meeting?
I look forward to seeing you. All right.
Me too.
And I need to
And
get
by
to
the way,
Connecticut.
Jeff, Maya Angelou had a great quote, the great poet. She said, people won't remember what you said. They won't even remember what you did. They will never forget how you made them feel. And our job, whether we're a board member or a staff member or a development officer, is to make the donor prospect feel like they're the most important person in the world. And I make a little guarantee here. The more you're asked, the more you're going to get. Jeff, you want to expand on that a little? It's great to have strategies and 500-page proposals. You got to ask.
Well, my mentor and friend Jerry Panis would often tell the story of a Girl Scout who had won the national sales competition, and they were interviewing her, and she said, or they asked her rather, what was your key to success? And she looked up with these big eyes and said, sometimes you just got to stop the chit chat and ask. So, asking is a wonderful tool. Asking is a wonderful way to benchmark your relationship. It doesn't have to be a big ask. It can be an ask for advice. It can be an ask for money. But along the way, we need to be asking because it's a benchmark of how deep the relationship is becoming. And it's a way to learn what are the donors' needs and goals and aspirations and values, and how can we. So it's not only money, but yes, we need to be asking, at the right time. But if we let too much time go, and this is something my good friend David was sharing with me last week, if we let too much time go by without the ask, we're not doing the donor service, are we?
Jeff, I want to thank you for your wisdom and your mentorship and the leadership you have provided everyone in the fundraising profession in the nonprofit sector. And what we're going to do, we're going to post a short written summary on LinkedIn and Facebook. And then Jeff's going to follow up, and Lighthouse Counsel is hosting a briefing on Giving USA. I think it's Jeff, it's free, right?
Free on July 19th.
Okay. And he's going to give you a sign-up mechanism. Will be on the LinkedIn page about this webinar. And then Michael Largent, thank you as producer. He is going to do a spin dry, and we're going to share a tape of this with everybody who signed up. And also we're going to post that on LinkedIn and on Facebook. So once again, I want to thank our learning community who every day is out there doing something to touch, improve, and save more lives. And I want to thank my friend and colleague, Jeff Jowdy, again, for being one of those wise and sharing people. So thank you for the knowing head and the honest heart that you bring to our profession. And we look forward to having you back later in the year. Thank you, Jeff.
Jim, I'm grateful to you and my friend, and I'm grateful to everyone who participated today and those who might view this in the future. Just grateful, as you said, for what each of you do to make a difference in this world. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's see, 2 weeks from now, on June 29th, Margie Hellshine from Boca Raton, Florida, Executive Director of America Connected, is going to lead a workshop on the synergy between mind, body, and soul. I think we all can use that. We're in a very stressful profession and time. So everyone stay safe, and thank you for the contributions you make to make our world better. And good night. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you all.